forward, progressing in this transformative study of the teachings of Chassidus as taught to us in this particular case by the Rebbe Rashab. This is the book that we're studying, To Know God. It's available online by Kahot Publishing House, which is the Chabad Publishing House, Kehot. If it's out of print, you can still find this entire book on the website. I forget the exact link, and hopefully Winston will post it momentarily, the link online. If anybody else knows the link, please do post the link where it is available on our website for free to study and to follow along. So we're covering ground in this magnificent discourse, which is designed by the Rebbe Rashab. It was taught by the Rabbi Shalom Dave Bershnerson in 1897 in Moscow. It was a transformative paradigm shift in consciousness. By drawing on a verse which we recite 3 times daily, Veyodayta Hayom, which is the name of the discourse, and you shall know today that Havaya and Elokim is all one. Havaya and Elokim is 2 names of God. If you take it to heart that Havaya and Elokim is all one, that's when you will be able to experience your spiritual exodus from Egypt. Your spiritual exodus from a state of slavery of the mind, limitations of the heart. You'll be able to literally unleash your soul. It starts in the mind and it ends in the mind. Human beings are rational creatures. We've been created vertical, not horizontal. Whereas the other animals are horizontal, their brain and heart are on the same level. The brain, the heart, and the liver. Liver represents the blood, which is the action, the passion. So brain, so intellect, emotion, and passion is all on the same plane in an animal. It's horizontal. Like a dog. What's a dog? Kelev. Kelev means kula lev, entirely heart. He's entirely heart. Very loyal animal, but it's very instinctive. Right? You don't find a dog that will change the lifestyle of dogs because of the way he thinks, so sophisticated approaches to living. But a human being is vertical because the mind rules over the heart, which rules over the passion. It's vertical. Brain, then heart, then liver. And when we change how we think, we can actually change the world. And that's what this discourse is about. Thank you, Winston, for posting the link online on Facebook and on YouTube. Always appreciate your comments, everybody, when you comment and tell me what you're thinking. And it's good to hear. It's a little challenging sometimes to teach through the virtual medium. Thank you, Mark, for being here with me today for the live studio audience.
Good to be here.
And here we go. Good morning, Elaine. Who else is with us? Anyone else that's with us live or later? Thank you for joining me here. Okay, so what we're experiencing today, we're actually on page 4 of the discourse. I don't know how that pans out on the online version of it. If it's probably in the online version, you're probably in paragraph 6, which begins in Kabbalistic terminology. That's where we're starting today. We're hoping to cover the next 2 paragraphs. So, where we're starting today is in a profound, game-changing way of thinking. It says in the verse, which is the foundation verse of our discourse, that Havaya and Elokim is all one. Right? Havaya and Elokim. Havaya and Elokim is 2 names of God, which we discussed in the previous class. You can find that class at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. That's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens under the playlist called To Know God. And at this point, what we explained there was that there are 2 different energies. There are 2 different characteristics of God. The name Havaya and the name Elokim. And how could they be one and the same? The Rebbe Rashab takes it deeper at this point, where he shifts our perspective on reality by describing everything that exists in terms of hardware and software, body and soul, matter and form. Every existence has an inside and an outside, as will shortly be explained. Now, we're going to explain that Havaya represents the inside and Elokim represents the outside, 2 opposing energies. But before we can get back into Havaya and Elokim to understand why they're so different, before we can understand the question, before we can answer the question of how they could possibly be one, which is what the verse is saying, that Havai and Elohim are all one, and you shall know this day that Havai and Elohim is all one. We have to really shift our perspective and perception of reality to be able to get comfortable with this concept, that every single thing that exists has an inside and an outside. And if we can get comfortable with that concept of seeing everything that exists around us, not as a one-dimensional, superficial perception, but to realize that there's an inside to every iceberg that we see, we're going to change the way we think. In Chassidic terminology, we speak of the lights which illuminate the vessels. The lights illuminating the vessels. It sounds abstract. Sounds very removed from our reality, but it's actually the template of all things that exist, where everything has a what and a why. Everything has an action and a motivation. It's got a push and a presence. Let me explain. So you see a chair, chair, C-H-A-I-R. It looks like a chair. I see a chair. There's nothing too sophisticated about it. But when you look at it, there's different kinds of chairs. There's a chair which you would never want to sit on. I had a chair recently that I sat on, and it was just, from the moment I sat on it for the first time, it was already the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Not a very confidence-inspiring chair, right? In fact, we bought some fancy chairs recently, and they were exactly the same thing. They were also looked beautiful on the outside, beautiful. On the internet, they looked amazing. But the minute you sit in them, it starts to break from the first second. There you have a beautiful shell and a very weak interior, right? You know what I'm talking about, Mark? You got a very strong visual and a very weak soul. Strong body, weak soul. So in other words, you got a chair, but you don't want to use the chair because it's dangerous. I want to sit in a chair and forget about the need to worry about my balance. But instead, when I sit in this chair, I start to worry about having to worry about my balance. That doesn't really inspire the confidence that the chair is supposed to inspire within you. So yes, the chair is a chair, but without its soul, without its fulfilling the why of the chair, the what really serves very little purpose. It just takes up space if it doesn't really allow me to relax. If it makes me nervous to sit in that chair, then what do I need it for? Chuck it in the garbage. So you have a what and you have a why. And there's both elements which are vital to the existence and the proper use of this chair. Good morning, Soteria and Adrian. Adrian, you're an anniversary follower. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean you've been a third anniversary follower? Does that mean we've been studying together online on Facebook for 3 years in a row? Sounds fantastic. I mean, if that's what that means, but okay, sounds great. I love how when you can't come to shul, you can still study with me online. It's beautiful. Thank you. No. So you're okay with this concept, Mark, about the what and the why? Everything is like that. I just used an example of a chair. I'll give it. Let's talk about a marriage. A marriage is the same thing. So you have a what? There's a man, there's a woman. They live together, share a bank account, share a bedroom. Amazing. But now there's a why. Okay, so why did you do this? Because you want to experience love and peace and serenity and family, right? But if you're fighting all the time, then what's the point? So you have all the external trappings, the new house and the new mortgage. You got the new furniture and the white picket fence. But what you don't have is peace. So what's the point? Right? You have the vessel and you have the light. I'm just explaining this concept before we read it on the inside, right? Everything has an action, a physical, and a motivation, which is a spiritual, right? When we learn to discern the presence, when we learn to see everything as beyond superficial, then what we've done is that we've reinvented our natural default setting. You see, we learned in Tanya, in the very, very beginning of Tanya, chapter 1, we learned that our souls, our animal soul, originates in a place called klipa, and I've spoken about this before. Klipa means superficiality, which means we literally judge a book by its cover. We believe in what we see. That's it. We see a movie and we get all emotional, even though we know it's fake, right? Let me just finish this point. So we believe in what we see. We are one-dimensional perceptors. The way we've been built, programmed by divine design, is to judge by the sight of our eyes, which is why the marketing industry is so huge. It doesn't matter what you do. It all matters about what you say that you do. You can have the biggest planet polluters out there, right? ExxonMobil, right? And you can say, you can make a nice logo that looks very earthy. And you can say, we care about the planet. That's it. You're done. If you can put that on TV and do a $100 million ad buy, you're done. You've now been sanitized because that's what you said that you do, right? You can be an anti-Semite and you can say that the security of the Jewish people is sacrosanct. That's it. It doesn't matter what you do. It just matters what you say that you do. And we, foolish people, pardon me, that's how we're programmed. We judge by the side of our eyes, right? But if we're able to follow the Rebbe Rashab in this discourse, the very first thing that he tells us at this point in today's lesson is that everything has a vessel and a light. Don't judge the picture, but look inside the picture. It says in Ethics of the Fathers, don't judge the picture, but what's inside the picture. You can have a very beautiful picture, which has got garbage inside of it, or you can have a very ugly picture, which has fine wine in it, right? Make sure you know what's on the inside, right? Even though, and why does the Mishnah need to teach us this directive? As if, like, what, that's rocket science? Science says yes, it is rocket science. Because we are one-dimensional perceptors. What we're doing in this discourse today, and we're about to read it on the inside of the discourse, is discovering a depth that lies beyond the perception of our eyes. When we learn to discern the presence of the divine energy within each existence, the divine energy, that's key here, we've successfully shattered the superficial klipa perception, which is our default. This is the primary goal of the Rebbe Rashab in this discourse, to reset our default vision based on Tanya chapter 1, where we judge by the vision of our eyes alone and thus learn to see what lies beneath the surface. You were going to say something more.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is this leading to like the what is God and why is God kind of from
Okay, so you're already applying it. So does this lead eventually into what is God and why is God? You know, I like how you asked that question, because where we're going with this is that what is God will be Elohim, the name Elohim, and why is God is going to be Havaya. In other words, that's going to be a very interesting way of explaining the discourse. But yes, I do think I would agree with you that that's exactly where we're going. And I'm glad you asked the question to make sure we don't get lost here. We're tethered, right? We don't get lost. And the lights and the vessels, right? And the icebergs, is that where we're going is that within everything that exists. Well, let's talk about this a second, right? So you see the chair, right? So what's the soul of the chair? So I spoke about comfort and design, right? Peace of mind versus anxiety and instability. But there's yet another deeper soul, like the layers of an onion. There's depth beyond depth, right? If we dig deeper, you can bring a microscope, and what else are you going to see in the chair? You're going to see atoms and electrons, right? You're going to see unexplained movement. You know that science cannot explain why electrons move always without stopping. Do you know that? And I know that David is one of our students here in this class. David from Loxahatchee River, and he is a Harvard scientist of sorts. I'm not sure exactly which kind. And I'd love to hear from you, David. If you're watching live or later, let me know. Rabbi@jewishgardens.com is my email, rabbi@jewishgardens.com. Please let me know if you could just confirm that for me as a scientist, or anybody else that is a scientist, if there is a scientific explanation as to why it is that electrons are perpetually in motion. Nobody can understand this, nobody can explain this, but Torah tells us. It's because God is constantly creating the universe. That's why. Because God speaks the world into existence, not once, but at every single moment anew. This is a basic principle in Chassidic, in Chabad philosophy, right? That God creates the world at every moment in time, which means that there is an energy inside of the world. Let's talk about a new what and why. The what is going to be the subatomic structure of the chair. And the why is going to be the divine energy inside of that. In terms of this discourse, we're going to put it this way, Timur. The creative energy in the chair, the divine energy that's creating the chair, that's Havaya. The electrons, which seem to follow some repetitive pattern that we call Mother Nature, that is the expression of the veiled energy of godliness, the hidden energy of godliness, what we call Elohim. So where we're going with this is that the body and the soul is of everything is actually the revealed hand of God, hidden inside of the concealment of God. The hidden hand of God is the revealed hand of God. There's the hidden hand of God. One covers over the other. The former we call lights. The latter we call vessels. We'll see that in a moment in the discourse. I'm thrilled you asked that question. Okay. Okay. So back to the discourse, and let me just finish my thought process here. Once we've successfully made that move to see beyond what meets the eye, then it's plain sailing until the Rebbe can bring us to see, in this discourse, the deepest depth that lies within each existence. What I just said is it's dual godly energies. Like the layers of an onion, there are multiple layers to existence. It's only a question of how deep you can dive. Have you ever been scuba diving? Never did it? So it depends. It depends on how deep you can dive. You can't just dive into any depth. You can't just go scuba diving anywhere. It's got to do with pressure. There's water pressure, and if you go too quickly, you won't be able to breathe. Your lungs are used to the pressure above water, and if you go too quickly down, then your lungs will collapse, God forbid, because they can't keep up with the pressure. So it depends on how you can acclimate your lungs to be able to withstand the pressure at deeper depths. The question now is, as we go soul scuba diving, when your soul goes scuba diving, not into the ocean, but into perception of reality, the question is how deep, how much pressure can you sustain? And that's why we need to weight it slowly through the stages of this discourse to make sure that you don't just freak out from the depth that the Rebbe Rashab is about to give us, but he takes us through a longer process where he allows us to what we call in scuba diving equalizing. What you do is you're supposed to go like this. When you go scuba diving, you're supposed to pinch your nose under the water, and you blow through your nose while it's pinched. You go, and what that does is that it unblocks your ears because it increases the pressure inside of you, right? By the way, whenever you're landing on an airplane and you feel the pressure in your ears, that's the best thing to do. You learn it from scuba divers. Just close your nose, blow, and then you'll unclog your ears because the pressure obviously is changing as you're landing from the altitudes. So what you're doing is that you got to equalize it as you go further down, right? Same thing with studying the discourse. You can't just go from where you live your life. You've lived 60 years of your life, and now suddenly you go to tremendous steps. You're gonna flip out. What you need to do is you need to equalize along the way. That's why I'm breaking this into small bite-sized pieces in this discourse that we teach every Monday and Thursday. So let's equalize as we go along the way. It's a good analogy there. Okay. Funny my notes here. Now, this holds the key to evolve our perception as we develop through the discourse. Initially, we perceive these two, the body and the soul, the matter and the form, the what and the why, as opposing energies. But we will eventually learn to see them as complementing each other. That's where we're going. They're complementing each other, working hand in hand, not as two opposing forces, the physical and the spiritual, the what and the why, the matter and the form, but as two complementing forces, working hand in hand like a glove that covers a hand, as opposed to an ox pulling a plow. This is my own analogy. When you have an ox pulling a plow, you got an ox that does not want to be here. And what he has no choice. If he wants to get the grass, he's going to have to move with that huge heavy weight on his back. So what you got is when an ox pulls the plow, it's an opposing force. The ox wants to not be here, and the farmer wants to plow this ground. So together they kind of make some sort of a compromise using the brute strength of the ox to pull the plow to plant the field. So there you got two conflicting forces. But when you have a hand and a glove, the hand and the glove are not in conflict with each other. The car and the driver are not in conflict with each other. They're perfectly in sync. Right? Let's see this idea inside of the discourse. So I'm starting in the paragraph in Kabbalistic terminology. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Paragraph number 6 in the text. Any questions or comments come in online? Please do. Don't be shy. Good morning, Ed Hockman. Nice to see you with us, joining us. I see a question from Winston. Do we pronounce Havaya to Havaka with letter kuf, like we say Hallelujah? No, we don't. We just say Havaya. Havaya is fine. Interesting question there, Havaya. We don't say Havaka. Good question. Or you could chew candy in an airplane. That's a good point, Winston. Why can you do that? Because when you chew candy, you're also somehow increasing the pressure inside of your trachea or something. I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly, but that's an interesting question of why it is that chewing candy also equalizes. Have to stay strong, our truck driver. Shalom. Welcome. Good morning, Rabbi in class. Mark is a fan. Okay, good. So let's read this concept inside the text. It goes like this. In Kabbalistic terminology, we find a parallel explanation parallel to Havaya and Elohim. Godly light and influence is conveyed and revealed by the Sephiros, by the attributes of God, which have two dimensions. There's lights and vessels. The name Havaya is the source for the lights, while the name Elohim is the source for the vessels, as we just explained. The light is simple, above all possibility for division, and unlimited in nature. For the light is representative of the source of the light. It's connected to its source. It has no independent identity of its own, as explained in other sources, using the analogy of the sun and the light and radiance that it produces. Accordingly, just as the source of light is simple, totally above all possibility for division or qualification, and it is unlimited in nature, so too the light and revelation which emanate from it resemble its source and are simple above division and infinite in nature. So let's talk, just to explain this concept, let's talk about God's creative energy, right? So God's creative energy is the same in the chair, and the same in the earthworm, and the same in the tiger, and the same in the Pacific Ocean. When God creates the Pacific Ocean or a peanut, it's the same godly energy creating both the Pacific Ocean and the peanut. The same godly energy that goes ex nihilo. It's the same infinite lightning strike of godly energy that creates the Pacific Ocean and creates the peanut. Where the difference lies is in the expression of what's being created. He has a peanut, he has a Pacific Ocean, right? So when it comes to the energy, the light inside, it's the same light. It's the same infinite lightning strike that's able to create both items or anything that exists in this earth. In contrast, the name Elohim is the source for the vessels which contract, limit, and conceal the light, causing it to be expressed in different qualities, e.g. the attribute of wisdom or that of kindness. So here is where you get the differentiation in the vessel, in the packaging, in the external, in the matter as opposed to the form. In the body as opposed to the soul. The differentiation is how that infinite energy expresses itself. Here in a peanut, here in a Pacific Ocean, here in a Empire State Building, and there in an amoeba. The reason is the light is the same. It's the vessels that are different. Just like when you have a light shining in a house and you have different color windows. Here you have yellow light, blue light, green light, and orange light, right? So it's only because the windows are different colors, but it's the same light that's going through the house, the same sunlight that's going through the house. So too, Havaya is the light, Elokim is the vessels. Havaya represents God's light the way it comes straight out of God, unfiltered. Elokim is God the way he chooses to hide himself. We said Mother Nature is the same numerical value as the word Elokim, because whenever God hides himself, it's what we call Elokim. Whenever God hides himself, it's what we call Elokim, right? So what we're saying right now is that everything that exists has a body and a soul. It has Havaya, which is its essence, and it has Elokim, which is its presentation, its packaging. This is the difference between them. This is where we get it. I'm going to do, Mark, can you just get the door, please? Yes. Somebody's here. In contrast, the name Elohim is the source for the vessels which contract, limit, and conceal the light, causing to be expressed in different qualities, like the attribute of wisdom or that of kindness. This process of qualification comes as a result of the vessels. What we're ending off here today is that the light and the vessels are two opposing energies. There's the light and the vessel, there's the what and the why, the Havaya and the Elohim, they're two different energies. And if so, Havaya and Elohim are two different energies. How is it possible that they are one and the same? This is where we're going to leave it off today. We'll carry on, God willing, on Thursday with the next piece of this presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please do send me an email to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. Elaine's asking a question. Is it the case that Elohim and Shekhinah are synonymous? Yes, I would think so. Shekhinah is a divine presence, which means the divine presence that dwells upon this earth. The presence of God that rests on this earth when God chooses to put himself down here. But when God is in and of himself, as he's unlimited, unexpressed, just by himself, that's Havaya, that's God's infinite light. Winston, because Aluka is in the Siddur, so it needs a kuf. When we say it, how is it different from the word Havaya? It's because Havaya is already an abbreviation and a pronoun. Very well said. Yes, exactly right. Havaya is already an abbreviation. Very keen observation there. Hallelujah is actually a real word which speaks about praising God. So we don't want to say God's name in vain, Winston. Rather, we'd rather say Ka. But when we're only saying Havaya is not a reference to God. It's already an abbreviation, and therefore it doesn't need to be turned into Ka. So Tyria, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, everybody. We're going deep over here, but bear with me, and I want to encourage you to review these classes. YouTube.com/Jewish Gardens and the To Know God playlist. To Know God playlist. YouTube.com/Jewish Gardens. This is deep stuff, but it is game-changing, life-changing, and it is incredibly rewarding. We'll carry on Thursday with this discourse. Tomorrow morning, we'll carry on with Tanya. Meanwhile, have a great day. Shalom, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. Perfect.